I want you to think about Peter in the Gospels. Peter, who was following Jesus. Peter, who saw Jesus do loads and loads of miracles. Peter, who in Mark chapter 8, when Jesus comes to him and he says to him, "Who do you say I am?" Peter replies, "You are the Messiah." Okay, so he declares right there that Jesus is the Savior. And let me just back up for a minute. In that passage in Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 27, the very first thing that Jesus asked Peter is, who do people say that I am? Who do people say that I am? And then the disciples replied, "Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you're one of the prophets." And then Jesus said, "But who do you say I am?" And that's because it's not only a moment by moment decision, it's a personal decision that you and I have to make for ourselves. Moment by moment, personal choice to declare that God is supreme, and that determines how we live. Now, in the very next scriptures, I mean, it's not even like a chapter later. There's nothing in the Bible that says sometime later, a few years later. I mean, it is in the next paragraph. Peter loses that declaration, loses that focus. It says, "Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things, be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise again from the dead." As he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples and then reprimanded Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not God's point of view." And so see, Peter in one breath was saying that Jesus was the Messiah. And then Jesus began to talk about the fact that he was going to have to walk through suffering. And so Peter didn't like that. And why would we like that, right? I mean, because Peter was thinking, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be the one that's going to save us from the Roman rule and make everything right in our life? And Jesus had a higher plan and a better plan. And just like that potter and the clay, that first vessel wasn't even, near to what God was going to do, right? But Peter had that limited understanding, and when he was faced with the fact that suffering was on its way, he said, "No way, Jose." And do you see how Jesus, right when his ministry was getting ready to take a turn, because up until now, things had been going, they've been going kind of great. I mean, Jesus was like a celebrity. He had all these people following him. He was healing people. He was changing the water into wine. And now everything is getting ready to turn, and Jesus says to them, suffering is getting ready to enter into the picture. And if you were a follower of Christ and you knew that Jesus was going to suffer, well, that probably meant you were going to have to suffer too. And Peter said, "No way, Jose." And then Jesus comes back to him and he says to him, "Get behind me, Satan. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Our view of God, our declaration of who God is, our view of God is vital, but the reality is that the longer we walk with God, the stronger our declaration will need to be, because you and I will face things that have the potential to distort our view of who God really is. And when we do that, we become a victim instead of walking in victory. Because the only way that we can walk in victory is to know that we are walking with the strength of the Lord.